What's up, guys? Today I'm going to be showing you how I like to weld out these overhead T-joints or a 4F weld. I already made a video on this in the past, but it was really short, so I figured I'd make a new one a little bit more in-depth. The most important thing about welding out these overhead T-joints or any T-joint in any position is going to be a rod angle. The rod angle is going to allow the puddle to lay itself in a specific area. So for instance, I want to tie into the top and the bottom of this plate. The best angle that I found is about right here. That's for the first pass. For the second pass, I'm not gonna hit the same angle. For the second pass, I'm only gonna wanna cover about 60% of it and then put some metal on the bottom. So I'm gonna manipulate my rod angle to allow that. Every time you manipulate your rod angle, it's gonna change the position that the weld is gonna lay itself. So once you understand, manipulating your rod is gonna position the weld puddle in a certain area, then it's, these T-joints become so easy. So once you understand rod angles on these joints, it's gonna be so easy. So I'm gonna go through each pass and each rod angle and explain why I chose that rod angle. And hopefully this video helps you guys out. So let's get to it. All right, guys, so for my first rod angle, like I was saying, I like to kind of point a little bit to the top of that plate, because if you point straight 45, gravity kind of focuses more on this bottom plate. Gravity, things fall, so the puddle's gonna fall more on this bottom plate. So to fight gravity and to kind of spread the puddle symmetrically, I aim a little bit more to the top. Gravity's gonna allow the puddle to fall regardless, so don't go straight up, obviously, but I go 45 and then kind of tweak it up a little bit. Watch the puddle, make sure you're tying into the top and bottom plate, and the bottom's gonna lay itself. So that's how I'm gonna lay the first bead, and we'll check it out afterwards. All right, so on this first pass, it's really important to put down a good foundation for the beads after these, so you can cap properly. And I like to use an angle pointing more towards the top of the plate so you can kind of spread the metal from the bottom to the top. I noticed whenever I started using the 45-degree angle, it would put more metal on the bottom. So using this angle, it would put more metal on the top. And then, like I said, it would make it a lot easier to stack welds on top of this first bead. It's a good foundation for the beads to come. All right, now on this second pass, I'm gonna hit it at about a 45-degree angle because now I want to put more metal on the bottom half of the weld. Go about 60% on this second pass. 60% coverage, and leave a little groove for the top for that third pass. All right, so on the second pass, all you're really doing is leaving a nice little groove for your third pass to lay into. If you were to cover about 80% of this first pass, you probably would leave too tight of a gap to where you'd end up trapping slag. And if you were to only cover about 30 to 40% of this first pass, it'd probably leave too big of a groove to fill in. So I think when you only do about 60% coverage of the first pass, it leaves a nice little groove, a little bit more than half. Basically, you always just want to leave enough room for your last pass to lay in correctly. So always plan ahead. All right, so for our third pass, it's going to be very similar to our first pass. We're aiming towards the top of the plate and allowing gravity to fall into place. That's why it's very important for that second pass, you leave a nice groove for your third pass. The better groove you leave, the easier it's going to run. So just keep in mind when you're running that second pass to leave a decent groove to where you won't trap any slag, or you won't leave it too big to where you can't fill it in. So just keep that in mind for your second pass, and your third pass will always lay in perfect. All right, I think our third pass laid in really nice. Now we're ready to start capping it, putting a 3-bead cap on. Remember what I said about this second pass? You wanted to leave room for your third pass, leave a nice groove. You need to keep that in mind when you're putting in this 3-bead cap. So on the second pass, we did a 60% coverage. We can't do that right now because if I cover 60%, I'm not gonna have room for my second pass. Definitely not room for my third pass. So on this first pass of the 3-bead cap, I'm only gonna barely cover this first pass because you need to leave room for your second pass and definitely need to leave a groove for your third pass. So just keep in mind, you need to work a little bit lower and just save yourself a nice little groove for your third pass to lay in. So as long as you're planning one rod ahead, this should come out really good. All right, so remember, on this first bead of the 3-bead cap, we're only gonna cover about 20% of that second pass. You gotta leave room, you gotta leave a little groove for the top third pass. So don't cover that first pass a lot, which would be your second pass. I know this probably sounds confusing. All right, so after this first bead of the 3-bead cap, you should still be able to see that second bead. I know I kind of went up a little bit, but you don't want to cover that second bead all the way because I still need to save room for this second pass. And if I burn this second pass correctly, I should leave myself a nice little groove for that third pass. So just keep in mind when you're putting in this first bead of the 3-bead cap to not cover that second pass because you have to leave room for 2 more beads after that first bead. All right, so the second bead on the 3rd bead cap is gonna be very similar to the original second bead, where I was kind of coming in at a 45-degree angle. The most important part is leaving that top groove. So on this first bead of the 3rd bead cap, the reason why I started so low is because now on the second bead, all I really gotta focus on is covering 50% of that first pass. Because since I started in a good spot, if I cover 50% of that first bead, it's gonna automatically leave me a groove. So that's kind of why it's important to, be able to start your caps in a certain area, because all you have to do from there is just 50% coverage, and it always leaves you enough room. So right now I'm just gonna focus on covering this first bead 50%, and it should leave me the groove that I need for the third pass. All right, so when you're looking at your second bead of the 3-bead cap, it should look very similar to your original second bead where you had a little bit of a groove left. But in this scenario, we're looking at the 3rd bead groove on, when you have your second pass, we're looking at the groove on the first pass. I know it sounds a little confusing, but basically everything's gonna look exactly the same. You're gonna be leaving a little groove for your final pass. Just remember that no matter what, if you are coming up to your final pass, just make sure you're leaving enough room to put it in any process. Just make sure you always got a nice little groove. This little groove helps you lay the weld in so much better. All right, now for the final pass, it's gonna be very similar to your first pass and your third pass, where we're kind of angling the rod towards the top of the plate and allowing gravity to let the puddle fall into place. This is why it's so important to leave that little groove. Now that we have a nice little groove in there, it's cakewalk. That's why it's always good to plan ahead. If you're planning ahead and you see a groove for your final pass, you're already in there. So just make sure you always plan ahead. Make sure you have a groove for your final pass. And these T-joints are easy. All right, I know this is not perfect by any means, but I think this video will give you a good idea on how to weld these T-joints out in any position and stack these caps. Just remember to always leave a groove for your final pass. If you got to plan ahead, start a little lower because you know that 50% coverage on each pass will only leave you a little groove at the top. Then, that's how you got to do it. Just plan ahead and make sure you always have a final groove for your last pass. And these T-joints will be a lot easier.